There we go. Yeah, we got it working.
Hi.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
Good. How are
Good.
you, Caitlin?
I'm doing well. Let's see. Let me get this set up. All right. Hopefully everyone can see. All right. Well, we have a few people joining us here. Oh, it looks like Amy's mom has just joined us. Hello.
Hey, Mama.
So this is Amy Maples. I'm Caitlin Moore. Thank you guys for joining us today. This is part of my interview series, interviewing different voice types about teaching their own voice types. And Amy and I actually know each other pretty well. We knew each other when we were younger and have recently rekindled our friendship because we both live in Colorado now. So Amy and I we both lived in Tennessee, grew up there as children and knew each other and sang together in church. We learned how to sing harmony and then from there went on to both be classical singers. And so we are singing together again sometimes as classical singers now and as opera singers. So it's funny how we've kind of come full circle. But yeah.
From the from the Christmas musical in fifth grade,
I know.
all the way to the Lock May duet in our 30s.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so funny. I remember Amy was one of the first people I knew that went to school for music, kind of as a classical career choice. And I just remember being like, oh man, that looks really fun. That looks like I would want to do. So she was kind of the first one that I knew that went that direction and kind of encouraged me to do the same. So that's pretty cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about soprano today. Let's see. So I do have some icebreaker questions from our audience. So let's see here. Which one should I pick today? I kind of like, okay, let's start with, I saw you post something about personality stuff yesterday. So Lindsay Marks actually is asking, what is your Enneagram number? Do you know your Enneagram number? Have you taken this one?
He would ask about the Enneagram.
So we're starting with personality here.
I'm pretty sure I'm a 1.
A 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is the number nobody wants to be.
Yeah, exactly. I can say that too because I think I'm a 1 too, which I think we've talked about. And like our Myers-Briggs are similar. I think I'm an ESTJ, and yours.
And I'm an ISTJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for those who are watching, Caitlin and I are the quintessential perfectionists. High standards for ourselves, organized, meticulous.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting actually thinking about those kind of personalities in the arts, because a lot of times you have they're not typical, I feel like, for STJs to be in the arts. So we might have a conversation about that later. I think there's some
actually, it's a really interesting conversation because it's sort of like the left brain, right brain thing. And like, typically you think of an artist as somebody who is like living in their right brain, right? Like the creative, blah, blah, blah. And like, we're really left brain people. We're really like rules, regulations,
exactly.
Organizing and spreadsheets.
Right.
Which is like a totally different way to approach art. But yeah, that would be very interesting.
Yeah. So here we are now on Instagram, just trying to flex all of our creative muscles. Yeah. Anyways, all right. So the first thing I want to ask is how you discovered singing, how you discovered teaching, just kind of your journey, your background as far as that goes.
Yeah. Well, as you know, grew up singing in church. Just like you. My family is super, super musical. So my mother is actually a beautiful singer, a pianist, and she writes music. My dad was actually a percussion major at Lee.
Okay.
Back in the day.
Yep.
So my dad's still a drummer. My grandparents on both sides were singers, piano players, guitar players, songwriters. I have recordings of my great grandmother and my grandfather singing songs together that like he had written with his guitar, and wow. I come from just like a rich musical heritage, and fortunately or unfortunately, absolutely no athletic heritage.
Well, you chose the right profession, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I mean, I think it was just kind of in my blood. And then I always wanted to be like a pop star, of course, like a contemporary Christian pop star.
Right.
And kind of was working towards that. And then like found a girl that was teaching voice lessons and she convinced me when I was about 13 to start learning classical technique.
Mm-hmm.
And she was sure that in learning classical technique it would help all of my pop singing as well, and she was completely right. But in the process of working with her as a teenager, I realized, like, hey, I'm kind of good at this classical thing, and I think I want to like see how far I can go with it. So went to Lee University and majored in voice. Um, Found my way to Florida State for a master's in voice, and then after that, started doing young artist program work, and ended up in Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And then did you, because I know that you, yeah, Amy is a performer, sings a lot everywhere, a little bit of everywhere. Um, where did you pick up teaching, or how did that come about?
My first students were during undergrad. I was teaching some high schoolers while I was in undergrad, and of course, I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
Just kind of like feeling it out. And then as I went to grad school, I had a graduate assistantship. So basically, in order to pay for grad school, I was used as a voice teacher for undergraduates.
Right.
So, and which is a path that a lot of us take
Right.
when we're trying to get a graduate degree in voice. So when I got to Florida State, I think I had like 12 students maybe who were
Mm-hmm.
all non-major voice students
Mm-hmm.
in their undergrad. And so that was really my first taste at like what it was like to have a studio, like a full studio of singers of all voice types. And that was what, 21, I think, 22
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are kind of thrown into that role, and some people find they really like it. Some people find they don't like it as much and they want to continue to perform.
Yeah.
But I think that it's something that all of us will probably do at one time or another if we're singers.
Yeah, definitely. And I never saw myself as a full-time voice teacher, like, oh, I'm going to have a career as a voice teacher. And
Right.
I still don't, in a sense. I'm very much a performer and want to continue performing, but
Mhm.
teaching has become sort of this like wonderful other side of the coin.
Sure. Yeah. I always say, for me, I love teaching. I've always wanted to be a teacher. I also love singing, of course, and performing. But for me, it kind of, my teaching helps my performing, and my performing, it really makes me,
Yep.
us left brain people, it makes me think and analyze a little bit more, like my own technique. So I find it really helpful to
Yep.
do both. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I've definitely become a better singer from
Mhm.
teaching.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see Lindsay on here. She's laughing at your phrase, used as a voice teacher. Lindsay, we asked your Enneagram question. Both Amy and I are a 1. We've actually talked about this before, and we are STJs, both of us. I think I'm an E and she's an I. So I'm an extrovert and she's an introvert. But interesting thing. Maybe we'll have a personality chat later, and I don't know, a series about personality. Oof,
No,
that
we
would be.
really should.
Oof.
I'm very for this.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's see here. Before we go to the next question, let's ask another question. Oh, for those of you that don't know, Amy also has a career as a Britney Spears impersonator. So check out her Instagram. She's going through the 24 Italian songs, singing the different songs as Britney Spears. So someone has asked, Stephanie, she's asked, have you always loved Britney Spears? She wants to know your relationship with Britney Spears.
Brittany and I are tight. Um, I mean,
How did this come about? Like, what is this Britney Spears do all the time? Did you just kind of find out one day that you're really good at?
well, I think
Or,
a lot of singers are pretty good at impressions,
yeah, yeah,
right? Like, I think as kids, a lot of us singers could do impressions before we really knew that we could sing,
right.
which I could. So, I don't know. I mean, the first time I ever heard Britney, I did a Britney impression and it was there. So like in college, it was something I did a lot when we would go to karaoke. I would always like pick a Britney track and just sing it at karaoke as Britney.
Yes.
And let me tell you, those Tennesseans loved it.
We all love Britney. I don't think it's just Tennessee. It's everybody. We all love Britney.
I mean, I'm not like obsessed with her. I don't have a shrine to Britney in my house. I just happen to be pretty good at an impression.
Yeah, but that does bring up an interesting point too. I think as singers, you know, we do listen and try to emulate so much, like it kind of develops that ear and that ability to impersonate. So that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's go on to this next question. So the questions I want to ask, they're just about teaching sopranos versus other voice types. Amy is a coloratura soprano. That's the really high soprano, the really does all the really fast stuff, the really fun one, you know, the diva basically is what it is. And this first question is, what is the same about teaching students in your own voice type and all other voice types? So what's the same about teaching sopranos versus teaching any other voice type?
Yeah. Well, I think you're probably going to get the same answer from everybody, which is like the foundational techniques of singing are the same, right? Mm-hmm. Posture, breath, you know, right. Maintaining full support while you're singing, maintaining a relaxed open throat, a relaxed tongue, like engaging your soft palate, finding that the ring and the resonant space, like all of that stuff is the same. Yeah. I was about to go into what makes it different, but I'm guessing that's the next one.
Yeah, let's go on to that. So what is different about teaching sopranos, maybe specifically the higher sopranos than teaching any other voice type?
Yeah, well, with super high sopranos, there's an additional register, which is whistle tone. And well, okay, I'll say this. There are two kinds of sopranos. Sopranos that know they're sopranos and just want to sing high notes all the time, and sopranos that don't know they're sopranos and are afraid of high notes.
That's so true.
So it's a pretty different approach with each one. As far as whistle tone goes, a lot of times like we can't even like touch on it with the second type of soprano, right? The type of soprano that's afraid of high notes, like whistle tone is something we'll do later. But with sopranos who know that they're sopranos and love their high notes, we can play around with those, like that super high register that sort of just sounds like it's like Mariah Carey in that one song where she goes the da 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 da. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So we have these like little notes that we can play with at the top, which are surprisingly useful for us in coloratura rep.
Right.
But I would say like a big thing that I work on with my sopranos is building a foundation from the bottom.
Yeah.
So a lot of times what you'll get, or at least the perception of a soprano, is that like, oh, everything is easy.
Yeah.
Everything is easy for a soprano because they have high notes.
Right.
But the reality is the middle and the low can be really, really challenging for a soprano. And we have to build foundationally from literally the lowest part of the voice, from the low speaking voice, we build foundationally all the way up. And then as we're building, the top notes start to pop out better.
Yeah, I think, that's really interesting because for some of you guys might know that are joining us, I'm reading this. This is so, I'm really trying to pay attention to people's comments as we're talking, and I'm having a really hard time doing two things at once. Lindsay says, that's my 7-year-old's favorite song, and she believes she is singing Whistle every time we listen. Nora Mezzo says, so many of my teen students have no middle. Wild. That's so true. And I was just going to say, so a lot of you might already know my story, but I started as a soprano and then transitioned to a mezzo actually when I was 30. And so kind of late transition in life. It's been really interesting. I've always had a good middle, but I hadn't worked on it a whole lot, like really focused on it a whole lot until I switched Fox. It has been really interesting. It's just been a completely different journey. I mean, it's of course the same, technical, like broad technical things, but really living in that area of your voice is very different. And what I've noticed is my voices have actually gotten so much better because I have been so much more grounded in this voice. So I think that's absolutely, that's really neat to hear you say.
I think
Yeah.
that middle section, really between the first passaggio and the second passaggio, that whole middle octave for a lot of sopranos, or at least high sopranos, specifically
Right.
coloraturas, that's
Right.
that is the most challenging part. And unfortunately, in basically all of classical music, we still have to maintain that middle part of the voice for most of the songs, right? We're not just singing high notes the whole time. Like we have to dip down. So specifically with more coloratura voices, I do a ton of middle voice work. And for myself, that's what I mean, I still work my middle voice. When I'm warming up, I spend 30, 45 to an hour just in middle voice before I ever approach the top notes. Like I said, it has to be foundational. We have to have that full open throat.
Right.
Release larynx, open throat, all of that has to maintain that steadiness all the way up into that second passaggio before the high notes are going to ring, you know.
Did you always know that, like when you were talking about the different kinds of sopranos, did you already always know that you had that top?
Yeah.
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 How do you approach that with students that are not as confident there? Like when you know that they have it, but that's something that, and maybe we're going on to some of the other questions I'm going to ask you, but is there a certain way that you talk about that with them?
I think with a lot of students, getting them to make noise up there is sort of the first step. And I think as a teacher, you can usually hear if somebody has the kind of voice that could go a little bit higher than they want to, you know?
Right.
So I'll do a lot of things with like an NG hum.
Love
And
that.
get them to slide into that higher register. A lot of times, high sopranos can take an NG hum up to a high E, you know, and they maybe have never opened their mouth and phonated with a open vowel on a high E. But once you show them that they can get there with, you know, a semi-occluded kind of sound, the confidence starts to build.
Exactly. Yeah. All of listening. That's why I do that with you. That's great. That's wonderful. We all do that. Yeah.
And you know, a lot of high sopranos can also do like a lip trill up to there. I can't. I actually have a terrible lip trill. It is not
your strong suit.
Not my strong suit, but NG hum I think is really, really good for getting somebody used to phonating up there for a while. You can sustain an NG hum above the staff for a lot longer than you can sustain an open vowel typically.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's move on to the next question here. Oh, or should I ask? Oh, here's an interesting question from a listener. This is from Sophie. She asks what your favorite dinosaur is. That's a really
I do know names of dinosaurs because I have a 2-year-old.
Oh, right. That's true.
Have
a favorite out of the dinosaur family?
I mean, no, I don't have a favorite, but I can name some dinosaurs for you.
Well, you should probably go ahead and do that then.
How about Velociraptor? We'll
So
go with Velociraptor. Is number 1, and we'll say Stegosaurus is number 2.
Perfect. Good. Now we're going to have to go watch some Jurassic Park after this. Okay. So what are some vocal challenges that you see most often in your own voice type? In soprano
voice type. Oh, yeah. I mean, we talked about this, but definitely that middle voice area.
Yep.
The soprano voice is pretty easy to get a nice ring in the top, and it's a lot harder to get that same kind of ring in the middle. Right. So while we might be able to phonate and make noise, it doesn't necessarily for lighter sopranos, for coloratory specifically, it doesn't always carry in the middle like it needs to carry.
Right. Right. Yeah.
A lot of times we're sort of lacking in those overtones in the middle. So that's something that we have to work on a lot.
It's so interesting. You think about sopranos, coloratory sopranos, and you think that you're spending all of your time working up at the top, but really you have to be careful with spend up there, right? Like you really want to make sure that middle, as we've said, is super anchored, and usually everything else kind of falls into place after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's I like to think of it sort of as a springboard effect.
Yeah.
When we're leading up to and approaching a high note, we have to spend all of our time down, like let's say you're a ballerina, right? And they say like you have to ground yourself in the floor before you leap,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's more about the
Yeah.
plie than the ascent.
Right.
So it's sort of the same idea with the voice. When we're approaching a high note, we have to spend more of our energy and ground ourselves in that middle as we're approaching it, and then we leap. And the leap sort of takes care of itself
Huh.
once you ground yourself in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is a good question. This is from one of my friends, Nora. She asked, how much super high, just God given and not necessarily teachable? So, in your experience, have you seen people expand their range a bit, or do you think that it's just kind of where how your vocal anatomy?
Well, my personal opinion is that the range that you're born with is pretty close to the range that you have, but you maybe just don't know how to get there yet.
That's a good point. Yeah,
You know
that's a
what
good
I mean? Like there
point.
is a physical limit. There
Mm-hmm.
is a physical limit to what your voice can do.
Right,
However, are most people anywhere near that limit? Probably not,
right, right.
right?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a certain anatomical element, right? Like how everyone's words are a little bit different. Everyone's vocal tract is shaped differently because we're all unique. And so I think that there are some limits there, but I absolutely agree. I think that a lot of times it's that people don't understand how to access the outer edges of their voice. So that's kind of where you step in and can help with that process. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. And I think, over time things change, right? The calcification of the
Well,
chords. Like I have probably a third or a fourth at the bottom of my range that I didn't have 10 years ago just because of aging 10 years,
right, right.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
So in the sense, like that's completely God given, right? I didn't do anything to learn how to sing those lower notes. I just let time pass by.
And that's so true too. And that's actually one of the things, I don't know how you feel about this, but it's one of the things that's frustrating about singing, but it's one of the things that's really exciting. Have a new instrument like every year, every month, every day sometimes it feels
Yeah.
like. But you do, your instrument changes as you age, as you learn new techniques, as you progress. And I think that's actually a really exciting prospect. I like
Yeah.
the I don't know, the challenge of harnessing a new instrument every
Yeah.
and
Well, I think a big thing about voice is learning the instrument.
sure.
Not necessarily like learning how to sing everything that you want to sing, but like learning how to access your instrument, how to feel it, how to manipulate it, what it feels like when you do something well, what it feels like when you do something poorly, so that as your voice continues to change over time, you adapt with it. You know what you can do with this new voice, with these new notes or whatever.
So true. And also, finding things that fit your voice well, right? Not trying to fit yourself and stuff yourself in the some box and hoping that you'll be able to sing this rep, but really listening to your body, listening to your voice, your technique, and
Yeah.
then like that well, not only I think with your voice, but also personality is a huge thing, even finding repertoire that fits you that way.
Yeah.
Things to be passionate about. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's see here. I have asked that. Okay, so we are on this last question here. What are three of your favorite vocal exercises specifically for soprano, coloratura sopranos? And by the way, I want to just make sure that we're keeping up with questions here. If you have any questions, just comment with them, and I'll ask questions after we get done with this last question. So, three exercises or just a couple vocal exercises.
Yeah. So, when I'm warming up a soprano, when I'm
Mm-hmm.
warming up myself or a student, I always start us in speaking register,
Mm-hmm.
actually. And we start first with working through that first passaggio.
Yeah.
Okay, so something that I like to do is to use a combination of vowels and a combination of consonants,
Mm-hmm.
and speak sing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to start with just kind of speaking in our low speaking voice register. This is just one example of a combination you could use, but I'll show you. Zybe, zybe, zy. And so what I'm doing is I'm just focusing on maintaining a low, relaxed larynx, an open throat,
Mm-hmm.
wide back of tongue, just thinking through how to make that sound as relaxed as possible. And then I start to go up through that first passaggio, keeping it close to a speaking sound. So as I get closer into my break, Zybe, Zybe, Zy,
Mm.
Zybe, Zybe, Zy. Could you hear that I
Yeah.
switched right there? So
Mm.
I'm not trying to sustain anything yet. I'm just trying to identify the feeling of maintaining that open throat as I start to go through the first passaggio.
Yeah. Right.
So
So
that's an
that's
example of something I would do just at the beginning of the warm up.
right. For those of you that are not be as familiar with the terminology and all that, just chest voice versus head voice kind of stuff that we're playing with around here. And I find it's interesting because some people come in with a really strong chest voice, a really strong mode one. They're very comfortable with that their voice, and this is especially interesting for sopranos. And then some sopranos come in and they are not comfortable singing in that part of their voice. They've either been told that it's wrong to sing there, or it's not pleasing, it's not in the style. So it is interesting kind of the mental hangups that people can have around either both head voice and chest voice. So
Yeah.
I love that exercise as a way to get very centered in your speaking voice and your motion and in your chest voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll sort of do that foundationally, building up. And then another thing I like to do is still sort of staying through that first passaggio, going up into middle voice. Still alternating open and closed vowels, still using a combination of consonants that will encourage a low larynx and a forward tongue. I'll do something like, and see, this isn't necessarily going to sound good because this isn't our weakest spot as sopranos.
Right.
So something like blinga blang, blinga blang, blinga blinga blang.
Mm-hmm.
And then continuing to move up. The G sound is really good for sort of popping open that back space, encouraging
Yeah.
the soft palate to lift.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I haven't.
And it's surprisingly hard. If you take that exercise all the way up into the second passaggio, it gets really challenging to make the B and the L sound. And so again, it's nice for encouraging a good tongue position and encouraging soft palate lift as you're going to the second passaggio.
I love that. I'll have to try that one. That's interesting. I haven't tried the BL combination especially. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then when I'm getting like significantly more warm and I'm able to do a little bit more expansive of an exercise, I like this exercise that will sort of help ground everything and keep checking in with that lower position as I'm getting higher. So I'm going to start with IBB. I'm going to go up through an arpeggio. I'm going to take a breath between each one. And then when I sing, every time I sing that ah vowel, I'm going to think about releasing and going back to that basic open throat feeling. So IBB, IBB, IBB. And then I'll take that up.
Yeah, I love that. That's nice. I definitely identify with I think one of the best teachers I had, she would talk about having the backspace on the lower part of the voice, the low notes, like that easy part of her voice, and keeping that space all the way up, which is exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. So that's a really good exercise for that. I like that. Lindsay's asking a question. She asks, what role do you believe the teacher plays in identifying voice type? Is it important for the teacher to weigh in, or is it better for the student to discover and name their type 100% on their own?
Wow.
Good question, Lindsay. I think we can spend a whole hour on that. What's your
gosh,
yeah,
that might be a case by case basis, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have had students who, insisted they were something because a teacher told them that.
Right.
Someone told him he was a tenor, and so now he's a tenor no matter what.
Yeah.
However, he's 16 years old. So I think in those cases, it can be really harmful for a teacher to label their student.
Yeah.
I think especially when you're talking about young students, really anything like mid-20s and younger, I think we do have to be careful about labeling too early,
Sure.
and allowing the voice to be discovered by the student, like just like Lindsay is saying. I think that's a really good point. I have, however, had students who needed my guidance, right? I mean, that's what we're here for, to say, you know what, I think actually your voice would work better in this kind of repertoire. Let's spend this semester in soprano repertoire and see how that feels.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
so I do think it's a process of discovery. And for me, I mean, I didn't necessarily identify as a coloratura until I was probably 21, 22.
Mm-hmm.
And even then it was tenuous, right? I was like, I think I'm a coloratura, but I'm not totally sure. You know,
Right.
at 34, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Right. Right. Okay. You answered Lily's question. She was asking how old you were. So there we go.
How old I am now? Was
Yeah.
that the question?
Yeah. That was the question.
34.
Yeah. I think that, when students are young, I always try to establish a middle voice. So actually exactly what we've been talking about, because everything I think builds off of a very strong foundation, middle voice, just a super healthy natural sound, right? And I think that the older a student gets, you do make those decisions together, and I like to get a lot of feedback from my students about, is that comfortable? Are you comfortable? You get to know your student and what they like to say, what feels good in their voice. And so I think, yeah, I think the voice teacher's job is just to guide. Now, if you do get a new student in there that's older, right? Because you might have had this situation, and I've had this situation too. A new student has come to me and soprano all their life, or maybe mezzo all their life, and they come had voice lessons in a while, in their older 20s or 30s maybe, and they're like, I don't know what I am now. My voice feels different, and that can be really exciting, because a lot of times you do discover that they've moved over a Bach.
Yeah.
They were a soprano and now they're a full lyric or a dramatic soprano, or maybe they've shifted down to more of a mezzo Bach, and that's something that I think as a teacher you continue to you know build your ears and your knowledge of repertoire, and hopefully guide the student in whatever direction they want to go. But I do think there is, just personally, as someone who went down to mezzo, some of my decision to do that was some of it was physical characteristic. I'm tall, I'm quite slender, so like me playing pants roles makes a lot of sense. I have enjoyed this repertoire so, like, I feel a lot more connected to this mezzo repertoire than I did to the repertoire. And I'm kind of in the middle, where I could kind of go either way. I could kind of do soprano if I wanted, or I could do this light lyric mezzo stuff, which I'm just enjoying the light lyric mezzo stuff a lot. So yeah. I think there's that element of it too.
Well, I think the idea of Fach in general, and for those who don't know, Fach means voice type.
Yeah.
So the idea of Fach or voice type in general, I mean, I think the idea is to be inclusive.
Right.
Right? It's so that, any rep that is written can be sung by someone, and that someone can sing some rep. Like anyone can sing something, right? So the idea that you have to be pigeonholed into just one,
right,
your entire life,
right.
I don't really know why that would be the case. I mean, I think like you said, our voices are always changing. As we get older, we gain high notes, we gain low notes. As you get pregnant, things change.
Right.
I think there's some flexibility there. And I think especially with young students, I think honestly it's a shame that we even ask them to say what they are when they are 18 years old, right?
Right.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's just so funny how there's so much mental game wrapped up in Fach, and it's just, I just always remind myself and remind my students, it's all man-made. Like, it's all made up. Your voice is your voice, right? Like, it's not real. Fach is not real. It's a man-made classification that we
My Fach is Amy Maples.
That's right. Yeah. The Amy Maples Fach. All right. Okay, let's see here. Let me see if there's any other questions. Okay, we got that. I think that's, oh, yeah. Christy asked a few questions again this time. I'll pick one of hers. Okay, which one? What is your dream role? Do you have a dream role?
Yeah, I have a few. Zerbinetta.
Mm-hmm.
I was supposed to do Zerbinetta this year, and it fell through. as you might imagine.
Yes.
However, it is still on my radar, and I am manifesting it every single day.
Hear that? Somebody tune in and give Amy a zerbineta.
There you go. Servietta, that's like, so I don't just love high notes and like beautiful lyric singing. I love like weird singing.
Mm-hmm.
And Strauss, I love that stuff. Super weird. So
Yeah.
Servietta, another dream role of mine, which I'm actually doing in May, is the coloratura roles in L'Enfant et les Sortilèges by Ravel. So that's
Yes.
Fire, the Nightingale, and the Princess.
Yeah. That's
So
what I posted. You guys that saw my story earlier. That's what Amy was practicing. So that'll be
yeah,
exciting.
yeah, and
Yeah.
again, it's like super weird stuff, right? It's really strange, hard to learn. Something that my my very like left brain thinking personality likes to
Mm-hmm.
analyze and all that. And then another dream role of mine is Sophie in Rosenkav.
Oh, love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should think about that. We could both sing that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, great. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. I don't think I have any other questions that people have asked. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I love these things that you've asked, and thank you for sending some icebreaker questions over. It's been really fun. You can follow me. Her Instagram is so much fun to follow. Amy, full disclosure, I chat a lot about social media. We're trying to figure out this virtual social media singer world together. So we've been collaborating quite a bit and trying to figure out what the heck we're doing. So give Amy a follow. She has some really funny stuff on her Instagram. As I said, her Britney Spears impersonations of the singing 24 a time. It's great. But also actually posts her real singing on there, which is absolutely glorious and absolutely beautiful. And she also works out a lot. So if you're interested in any of that, give Amy a follow. The Buff Coloratura is her Instagram handle. But thank you so much for coming and talking to me today, Amy. It's been great. Again, it's been really fun to reconnect with you and kind of sing with you and collaborate with all of this social media stuff. It's been fun.
Yeah, it has been fun. We'll do more. We'll do an STJ
Yeah,
discussion sometime.
singers and personalities. That could be interesting. Yeah.
Ooh. Maybe I'll do a reel about that.
Yes, that's what needs to happen. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for everyone for joining us. Hopefully we will see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Caitlin.